For those of you who don't know me, in my previous life, I was a philosophy professor. And in particular, I specialized in ethics. So I've been studying, researching, writing on ethics for, over 25 years, whatever it is now. And I left academia 7 years ago, and I started an ethics consultancy, and more specifically, an AI ethics consultancy. I sort of bet that businesses would care, for whatever reason, about integrating ethics into how they develop and deploy, use AI. That was the big bet I placed. So far, the bet has turned out pretty well, but there's a deeper question. What really does motivate businesses to spend money on AI ethics when they do, or as some people like to call it, responsible AI? And this is where my guest comes in. My guest today is Dennis Hirsch. He's a professor of law and computer science at Ohio State University and the director of the program on data and governance. And he's been doing research on what's the business case, what's the bottom line return on investment, ROI, for AI ethics or responsible AI, whatever you want to call it. And his answer is that AI ethics or responsible AI does play a role in supporting the bottom line through enabling innovation and building trust and a variety of other things that I'll allow him to say once we start the conversation. We talk about a lot of other things as well, like does it vary by company whether responsible AI provides an ROI? We talked about how do we measure the impact of an AI ethics program. Even though it seems to be a benefit to the bottom line, why are there so many companies still hesitant to adopt AI ethics practices? All this and more in a sort of really wide-ranging discussion on AI ethics or responsible AI and why it plays a role in business. And I should say that this turns out to be really important because everybody wants AI to be on the ethical up and up. No one ethically good is against that. But there's a real question here about whether there's a sufficient business incentive to get businesses to adopt those ethics practices. Because at the end of the day, AI ethics comes to life when the people developing AI actually implement those practices into how they develop and deploy AI. And the people who are doing that are people in business. So hopefully there is a strong business case for AI ethics. Okay, that's what this episode is about. For those of you who are listening on a mobile browser, and it's a shockingly large amount of you, please don't forget to go over to Apple or to Spotify or whatever your preferred podcast platform is and subscribe to the Ethical Machines podcast over there. Speaking of ethical machines, if you like this podcast, you might like my book, also called Ethical Machines. This is either because of a lack of imagination or brand consistency. I haven't decided which one yet. But anyway, you can buy my book, Ethical Machines, Amazon, and all the other places. You can go to my Substack, readblackman.substack.com, for lots of content there. And finally, you can email me to tell me to stop talking about my stuff at em@readblackman.com. All right, that is enough about me and my things. Let's go talk to Dennis about his things. Dennis, I think one of the big questions in AI ethics or responsible AI, whatever you want to call it, is whether businesses actually do in fact care about it, whether they should care about it. Of course, there's some sense in which they should care about it from an ethics perspective. Should they ethically care about AI ethics? Yes, obviously. But from some other kind of, business, bottom line, ROI, return on investment perspective, the question then becomes, is there value in it from that perspective, from a non-ethics perspective, such that companies ought to care? And I take it that you think that probably the answer is yes. And that's because you've got some research on such a thing, some findings on such a thing. Do I have that right?
That's correct. So our research suggests that responsible AI management, AI governance actually produces significant business value.
And by business value, what do you mean there? Do you mean savings? Do you mean increases top line revenue? What does that mean?
So we surveyed AI governance managers in early 2023.
Okay.
They said, first of all, nearly 70% of them said that responsible AI management, that's how we defined it, is either important or very important to their organization.
Doesn't their job depend upon them saying yes to such a thing?
Could be. And our research may suffer from selection bias in that sense, so we acknowledge that. Nonetheless, 70% of them said it was important or very important. 48% said that it created a lot of value or a great deal of value for their organization. Now, you asked what would go into that. Why might it create value?
Or what's the kind of value that it creates
Sure.
and why would it create it? Yeah.
So we asked that, and they identified a number of types of value that AI governance, responsible AI management generates.
Yeah.
One is value in terms of increased trust and reputation. I think that's commonly talked about in this space. Another
Yeah.
is preparation for regulation, and so being more prepared both for regulation that exists and regulation that's coming. A third is improved employee relations. Employees have values, and if they think that their organization is acting in ways that are contrary to their values, they are less satisfied, and their data is often used as well.
Yeah.
And we expected all of those, Reed,
Okay.
because we had done interviews in a separate research project with AI governance managers, and we heard all of that. But we got something from the survey that we hadn't heard before, and it was actually the number one response,
I'm on the edge of my
which
seat.
was, you're on the edge of your seat, good. It was that responsible AI management improves product quality.
Okay.
And that's real business value. All of these are actually trust and reputation, preparation for regulation, reducing regulatory risk, improving product quality. And the basic idea that one of the key takeaways is responsible AI management doesn't just help you to achieve your business values. We heard that too, but it also helps you to create business value.
I want to double click on all of these. Before I forget though, these are, you said AI governance managers. So can you give me a sense of the sort of the size of the organization of these people and
Yeah.
where in the world are they and
Sure.
where in the organization are they
Sure.
from like a seniority level perspective?
Yep. So they're US based companies. We focused exclusively there because Europe has a different legal scheme, and so I think they're in a different position. We reached out through business oriented organizations and data governance oriented organizations and think tanks like the Future of Privacy Forum, the Center for Information Policy Leadership, the International Association of Privacy Professionals. And that's how we found our survey sample. We had about 75 complete surveys, which is not a huge number. And it's not nothing, but it's also, given the number that we sent out, it was a relatively low response rate, again, suggesting potential selection bias. The size of the companies that responded average was over 1,000 employees and $10 million in annual revenue. And some were significantly larger than that.
Yeah.
So it was the largest companies that were responding, really. And those are the ones we think, those are the ones that have the most investment in this space, have the most to say, and therefore would take time to answer a 25-minute survey. So we think we were hearing from the organizations that are most involved, that have invested most in this space.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, even though that was our sample, we asked them, is your approach to making decisions about responsible AI ad hoc or systematic? And of that sample, 63% said ad hoc. They did not have a system in place for making decisions about responsible AI management.
That's interesting. That's so. What's their job? Is their job to make it systematic? Is that why they're the
I
people
would
to
hope
respond to these things?
I would hope that's part of their job. And we did this survey in early 2023, just as ChatGPT was hitting the business world. I think if we went back today, we'd probably find a different picture. I hope so, at least.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But what we found then was, the way we put it, implementation lags enthusiasm. They said it was very important. They thought it created substantial value, and yet the organization was still in the nascent stages of standing up their AI governance program. And that was among the largest companies. My suspicion, Reed, is that if we looked at mid-sized companies, much less smaller companies, and even a lot of larger companies, we would still find AI governance at the very early stages. And that's part of the reason why I think it's important to try to show, and if we can show it, to spread the message that responsible AI management actually generates business value. This is not just a cost. This is not just a trade-off. this potentially could make you more competitive. And that's when I think we'll start to see this really spread.
So let me dig in there. I'd love for it to be true, right? My business is designing responsible AI ethics management, whatever you want to call it, programs, AI risk programs for large organizations. Sure. And so, of course, I want them. I have a financial reason to believe this and to persuade others of it. Nonetheless, a little bit skeptical. My academic self has not left my body entirely. So let's talk about improves product quality. How would it do such a thing? The idea is something like, I don't know, somehow or other the thing is more respectful than it would be otherwise, and so people like it more, and so it's a higher quality product. What are we talking about when we talk about improved product quality?
That's a possibility. I have to say, first of all, I don't know the answer. That's the next step in our research, is to unpack that and try and find out what they mean. But I think one idea, and this is speculation at this point because I haven't researched it, is that it could help to meet customer expectations. Customer going to want AI products, AI grounded services that are more respectful of them. So I think that's one thing.
Yeah. That feels like a bit of a double dip with the trust thing, though. Maybe it's not. Because one of the things was it increases trust. But if what product quality amounts to is they trust the product, that's fine. Maybe double counting here is fine.
I think that makes sense. Yeah. So another thought that we have had and something we've heard in our interviews is that better AI governance can actually unleash innovation by giving clearer guideposts and giving a place to go to get a decision. So data scientists, innovators understand that there are both legal and ethical missteps they can make. And if they don't know where those lines are, that makes them hesitant. And so if you have a more developed AI governance program, you can give them a clear sense of where the lines are that they don't want to step over, and they can innovate with more confidence, and you can give them somebody to go to get a decision. Can we do this? Should we do this? And then they can innovate with more confidence. So that could be that it promotes more innovation and so promotes better product quality. I guess a third is it's just more governance. You're looking more at, let's say you're looking at your data set to understand whether it's representative because you want to prevent bias.
Sure,
right?
Bias, yeah.
Then you start to understand your data set better. You're managing more. And that might give you ideas about the quality of your data set and ways to improve it and things like that. So those are our ideas thus far, but I don't really have a kind of evidence-based answer for you yet.
Yeah.
That's the next step.
I mean, all this sounds plausible. Some of it I know, in my own experience, has been borne out. There are some clients who won't, it's not that they won't innovate. In some cases, they're scared to innovate, actually, like in healthcare, I think. But in other places, like in CPG, consumer packaged goods, they're more willing to innovate because they're in a lower risk category to begin with, but they won't scale the stuff until they know how to properly monitor and govern their AI, because they're like, oh, we've got a big brand, things go sideways, that's really bad for us. And so there's a way in which it didn't, I think for them, responsible AI it's more about scaling the innovation than it is about having the permission to create the innovation in the first place. Oh, so we've got this AI generated ad or something along those lines. We built it, we're not scared to make it, of course, and we'll even roll it out, but in a very tiny, small, very controlled way, because we don't really have the appropriate guardrails in place, because we don't know what they are. And if we did have those guardrails in place, if we did have the methods by which we could continuously monitor the AI system or the AI solution in real life as it's deployed, then we'd feel more comfortable scaling that innovation. So I've definitely seen that sort of thing.
Peter Cullen, who you may know, who was until recently with the Information Accountability Foundation, before that with Microsoft, he talks about reticence risk as one of the risk areas here, that if you're too hesitant, then you risk losing value in that way. And if you have better governance, you can be more confident, and so you can be more bold.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the exception is big tech companies, where they at least believe their profits will outrun any particular problems they run into, any sort of legal or even reputational problems. Facebook runs into Cambridge Analytica. They just keep going. They don't really care because their revenue is going to outpace any fines. Any temporary dip in their stock is going to rebound and then some. So I think for them, move fast and break things works from a financial perspective. And it's for those non-behemoths with insane revenue for whom I think this applies. So I would be very interested to see if you did more research. I know you're doing more research on this, but if the attitudes in large tech, super innovative companies differed from those in, say, healthcare or insurance or consumer packaged goods or e-commerce, whatever. I have a feeling that the big tech companies, maybe not Apple, but the rest are willing to take huge risks. And if they break things, that's more or less okay.
You could be right, and that may indicate that we need bigger penalties to get the incentives right. I do think probably those that are not in the very largest category might take this more seriously, and also those that are more public facing have more reputational risk. But I think even the big ones, like Microsoft has poured quite a few resources into responsible AI. Google has poured quite a few resources into responsible AI. I think they understand that the ecosystem needs to be trusted if their business models are going to be effective. And so they are taking some responsibility for that. And I think that's different than we can overcome any misstep. I think they need to be caretakers of that ecosystem for the digital society to continue to grow and flourish.
I think that's right. I do think that it is in the long-term interest of those companies to make it the case that people don't think AI is going to go off the rails, or to make it the case that people think that because AI won't go off the rails because they've done what they can in order to create the appropriate safety guardrails,
and
et cetera.
That's pretty precarious at this point. I think a lot of people are very suspicious of AI and have a lot of concerns about it, even as much as they are using it.
I think that's right. I don't know. I'm in a bubble. I don't know if you're in the same bubble, but the bubble is the AI ethicsy space broadly construed. And of course, those people are all worked up about AI and safety and this and that. I think the average person who's just not in this space, certainly not in AI ethics and maybe not in the AI space, my sense is that if they think about the risks of AI, I think they're either thinking of bananas existential risk, Terminator type stuff, or they're thinking of things like job loss. But I don't know that they are so worked up about the rest of it. Oh, I'm going to lose trust in this company because they're using AI or something along those lines. I don't even think they know. They don't even know what it is.
You could be right. I'm thinking I saw a survey of consumers recently that suggested that they are concerned, but I can't remember exactly where I saw it. And
I think that many people believe that they're supposed to be concerned. And so they say I'm concerned, but because they don't understand why they should be concerned, they're not actually concerned. So maybe, although I do have a friend, this was back maybe more in the existential risky days when GPT, close to when GPT with a 3.5 came out, when it exploded onto public consciousness. She did say to her son, my friend, I'm really afraid of all this A1 stuff.
That's funny.
So she got it. She knew that maybe there's something to be afraid of.
Right.
I want to talk about the trust thing, actually. Maybe you disagree with me on this. I've always bristled at things like, it increases trust. It increases trust. And I think the reason I bristle at it is that I don't think that people trust. I don't know. Trust seems like too positive of an attitude to have towards products or pieces of software.
Right.
I think there's the absence of distrust. That's more or less the best that you can hope for. I don't trust. Do I trust Apple to safeguard the data that my phone collects? I don't know if I have that sort of positive. I think I have the absence of deep distrust. Maybe I have a little bit of distrust. This sort of idea that AI governance, responsible AI, et cetera, creates trust is overly optimistic. I'm inclined to think that it does a better job at heading off the creation of distrust. And so then I don't know if that fits into creates business value or not. I guess that's some sense creating business value. I don't know. What do you think?
It's an interesting way of putting it. I do think that the key thing is that it makes an organization truly more trustworthy. Trust, you could have misplaced trust. I think that's something to keep in mind. So I think that organizations need a reason to invest in AI governance. And reputation and trust is very valuable to them, right? That's goodwill. So if they think this is going to impact it, that's important to them. if you have an AI ethics incident, something like a Cambridge Analytica,
Yeah.
right? Something that is publicized, that does affect people's view. People say trust, takes years to build up. It can be lost in a minute, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So
I think
companies
the partner says trust is gained in drops and lost in buckets, something like that.
there you go. Okay. There's an insurance company that I've talked with quite a bit about this. And their view is, and this is the head of their data analytics unit, that our company is built on trust, that people have to trust us, that we will pay out if they actually have a claim. And so if we use data analytics AI in an abusive way, we can lose trust there, and that hurts the core of our company. So I do think goodwill and trust are really fundamental, and you build it up by providing good service and doing so in a way that people feel respected. You're right in a sense that it's avoiding incidents, right? It's avoiding loss of trust.
Yeah.
It's avoiding that bucket. But I think it's also building the drops. That if you're using AI in a way that is beneficial to your stakeholders, that is improving your services, improving your products, you're building trust, improving your product quality, you are building trust as well as avoiding loss of trust. But I get your question about that.
So let me ask you this. Broadly, I absolutely think you screw up with AI, you're probably going to do it at scale, since you want to use AI at scale. The whole point is that it scales things quickly, efficiently, et cetera. It scales, which means if things go sideways at scale, it's pretty easy to lose trust, as we've just talked about. What gain trust is even harder. So it's very easy to lose trust. And it seems obvious, given that AI can go sideways in a number of ways. Those ways have been very well documented. Many of those risks have been realized by one company or a number of companies in some way or another. Every company wants to innovate using AI. All the big ones are going nuts about it, obviously.
Right.
And yet, there is this gap between saying, yeah, AI ethics, responsible AI, it's really important. We've got to maintain customer trust, blah, 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 and then actually doing it. I find that the biggest obstacle to designing and implementing AI ethical risk programs is not that we don't know what to do. We know how to do it. It's a lack of political will. It's a lack of internal political will within the organization. So I suppose this is all a ramp up to my question of why is there what explains the lack of political will given the fairly obvious connection between things going sideways with AI and your reputation being dragged through the mud? Why the lack of political will then?
I think it may have to do with the incentives in our system that tend to be short-term, quarterly reports, right?
Yeah.
Share price for the top managers, and trust and reputation and employee relations and the like are longer term. They are actually really important, but they don't pay off in the short term. And sometimes they might actually be costs avoided, which are harder to show, harder to get a bigger bonus for than profits gained. And so I think an analogy here is sustainability in the environmental field. And it took companies a long time to start to see that. And sustainability is really about longer term value. Like we want to be here for the long term. And what do we need to do to ensure that? And so I think this requires a very similar mindset. I came to first privacy and then AI law and policy from environmental law. So that's part of my framework for thinking about this.
Yeah.
But it took organizations a long time to see that they could actually become more competitive and help to ensure their longer term survival if they prioritize sustainability. They could improve their business performance by improving their environmental performance. I think a lot of organizations don't see that today, and so they are not acting accordingly. I hope to be able to show that. I think that's something we are trying to do in our research, is to show that this is in the longer term better for the business. And then the kind of enlightened companies that will think in that way will make choices to pursue that. Some won't. And I very much see, which is the AI governance people, the responsible AI people in organization get pushback from others in the organization, from
Right.
business units and others that are looking to be really aggressive with AI or looking for shorter term profits. And I think that's part of the nature of it. One thing I think organizations can do if they want to instill this mindset is start to add AI governance, AI ethics to performance evaluations. Make
Yeah.
that a part of how bonuses are awarded. Create performance incentives. If there is a leadership that wants to start to instill this perspective, they need to make it really matter to people in their organizations, and that's one way to do it.
Yeah, I do think that's where we need to get, but that strikes me. I don't know if you're suggesting this as a sort of opening move, because before you can give them those kinds of financial incentives, first you need things like, what's a policy around here? Like, what's the policy look like?
Absolutely.
What are the escalation procedures? If things go sideways, if we have questions or we do a risk assessment or an impact assessment, who do we escalate the issue to if it turns out to be high risk, and who's on that board? What's their jurisdiction, or what kind of power or authority do they have? And anyway, there's lots more to go into place. They need training, right? You can give them all the financial incentives you want, but part of the problem is that we're not trying to correct for bad behavior, right? The data scientists aren't engaged in bad behavior in a kind of Me Too situation, and that's why we have, let's say, biased AI. They could have totally good intentions and still wind up with, say, biased AI. They also need the right kind of training in place, right? Fairly advanced training.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This all goes to the how do we do it, which we do have a pretty good sense of. And I'm sure you've got your list of what an organization needs. I've got my list that they need the right management structure. They need the right people in place. They need the right management processes, including escalation. They need policies, what I think of as substantive policies, drawing lines between what's appropriate and what's not. But I also think, and I think this is critical, they need culture. They need people to buy into this, because if they don't buy into it, then the spirit with which they go about everything else is going to be lacking. And you won't really get the performance you're looking for. So how do you build culture? I think one of the ways is performance incentives. It's not the only way. Education, training, etc. So I think these are all pieces of the broader whole of AI governance, and they're each important. How you stage them, which comes first, I tend to agree with you. I think before you can build the culture, you need to give people a sense of what it is. One thing I depart from you a little bit on, though, Reed, is I think we each have our ideas on how to do this, and you work on this every day, so I'm sure yours are quite developed. I don't think we know yet what the best practices are, because from what I've seen, there's been very little evaluation of these practices, either on achieving social goals, social values, or on achieving business value. That's another thing we would like to do in our research, is start to actually engage in evaluation of various AI governance practices, impact assessments, and the like, and start to evaluate their outcomes. And then I think we'll not only know the practices, we will start to understand the best practices. But I don't think we know that yet.
How would you go about doing that research? One thing that I have in mind here is just there's so many variables. An AI gets deployed, it's used by a certain population, blah, 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 blah. There's so much that the supply chain, if you like, from getting that AI in use. So from the team that thought of the idea, to the team that sort of collected the data, to the team that cleaned the data, and then the training of the model, and then the validating of the model, and then the blah, blah, blah. There's so much stuff. So I guess I don't know how. Could you outline for me in some very high? I know it's got to be
at a very
high
level. At a very high.
Yeah. How do you isolate the variables enough to know that the responsible AI program is doing the work as opposed to something else?
Yeah, you have to define what you mean by AI governance, and then look for companies that are similar industry, similar size, et cetera, in many respects, but differ on this. And there's a methodology called difference in differences, which is specifically designed for this type of thing.
So something like, all right, we take 20 insurance companies, 10 of them have responsible AI programs, 10 don't. Let's look at the outcomes for the set of these 20. And it looks like there were 17 incidences, and they all occurred on the I hope this is what you hope to see.
Yep.
On all those companies that didn't have the responsible AI program. So it looks like responsible AI program is making a pretty big impact.
Insurance companies that were in similar businesses, similar types of
trying
insurance,
to fix for as many variables as you can.
That type of thing. Yeah. And that's pretty standard social science research. And I think it's very doable here.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing that strikes me as hard about that research is exactly what you said, which is it's not different organizations will have different definitions or conceptions of what constitutes AI governance. And I'm sure you've seen this where some companies think they already do responsible AI because, I don't know, they do a bias test. Their data scientists do a bias test before deployment. And they're like, we got the bias thing all on lockdown. And AI ethics is bias, which is, of course, bias is a narrow subset of the set of all of ethical risks. And then you've got other companies who have a full-blown, proper responsible AI program, AI ethics program, where it's much more serious. It seems like another difficult thing to track, the robustness of the various programs across different organizations.
Yeah. And I think we haven't done a good job as a society in articulating what other ethical risks count beyond bias, and including in the emerging law and policy of AI. I think bias is extremely important, perhaps the most important risk that AI creates that's going to affect the most people and speaks to core values in our society. But of course, there are many others as well in terms of privacy, autonomy, manipulation, empowerment, and opacity, all of those things. And our statutes today, the state statutes that are being passed around AI, and even the proposed federal laws, really speak to bias. That's their central concern, and don't start to unpack what some of the other values are also important that organizations also need to pay attention to. What Cambridge Analytica did had nothing to do with bias. It had everything to do with privacy and manipulation, and people did really care about that.
But I do agree with you that policymakers generally, and I think corporations, this feels like a worthy area of research as well. I think that I'd love to see you do, because I'm not going to do it. This space started off as AI ethics conversation. Maybe that's not quite right. In the machine learning literature was a lot about machine learning bias. But when it got a little bit bigger outside of technical stuff, it really became a conversation about AI ethics. And then eventually, when the corporation started talking about it, suddenly the word AI ethics, or the phrase AI ethics, became responsible AI.
Right.
And then they throw a bunch of stuff into that bucket of responsible AI. They say, AI ethics and security. So now we're talking about cybersecurity and privacy and things like engineering excellence, or they'll talk about model robustness as being a core part of responsible AI, general regulatory compliance. And then the ethics stuff just gets translated to bias. And so I think that the phrase responsible AI is a bit of ethics washing, because it's a way of not saying the word ethics and then talking about this other stuff. Now, who gets into the conversation about what should our responsible AI program look like? It's a cybersecurity expert. It's a privacy expert. It's a compliance person. It's a legal person. And so what you get is a responsible AI program that is over-indexed on the things on which they're already experts. And the ethics stuff gets left out.
Whether it's deciding whether to use inferences of people's psychological type to send them manipulative political ads, or it's deciding how much to invest in cybersecurity or any of these other things, I think what they share in common is that the organization has to make a decision, a balancing decision, where they're balancing potential benefits and costs. And there, I actually really like the term responsible AI, because I think an organization's moral obligation when making decisions like that is to be responsible, not necessarily to be ethical in the sense of aligning with one or another ethical philosophy. I think considering ethics considering ethical principles is an important step towards responsibility. I do think that's valuable, but I don't think that we can expect an organization to pursue virtue ethics or utilitarian or something, just like we don't expect ourselves. We expect ourselves to be socially responsible. And I think that's the right expectations for organizations as well. And so that's why I like responsible AI over ethical AI. I think it more gets to the point of what we're really asking for.
And that strikes me as a bit of a straw man, though, because it's as though I said this: look, Dennis, we need ethical AI or AI ethics. And what I mean by that is that the ethical principles should rule the day, and more specifically, companies should sign up for some particular ethical theory, like a virtue ethics or utilitarianism, a variety of it anyway, and then conduct themselves in accordance with that. But no one with any sense, no one with any brain says that.
What do you think they mean by AI ethics?
I think that there's a lot of ways of going ethically sideways. You've articulated some of them that are not legal. They're not illegal. It's not contrary to regulation. And the best way of articulating it would be in an ethical term. For instance, you talked about manipulation a bunch. For the most part, it's not illegal to engage in various forms of manipulation.
Right.
It's not contrary to regulation. What's the problem with it? It's unethical. Why is it unethical? Something to do with it's a lack of respect. It manifests a lack of respect for personal autonomy. Manipulation is an undermining of their autonomy. That's ethically objectionable. It fails to account for the dignity of human beings, blah, 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 blah. All these things are ethical things. It would be weird if you said, you know what, you should stop manipulating because it's not responsible. What does that mean? Why is it not responsible? It's not illegal. It's not contrary to regulation. It's not contrary to even sort of common practices.
To me, responsible AI is AI that better aligns, probably not perfectly, with our societal values. Don't manipulate people, for example. And so I would root it more in social values than in ethics per se, like moral philosophy.
Hold on, you do this weird thing where you think that ethics is like academic. So if I say something like, here's an ethical claim, you shouldn't cheat on your spouse. It'd be weird if you were like, listen, let's not get into moral philosophy here. Let's not get into moral theory. So, well, who said moral theory? I said, don't cheat on your wife. Don't lie to your best friend. There's all sorts of things that we, on a daily basis, we think are unethical without invoking any kind of moral theory.
I very much agree. And that's what I think we're agreeing more than we're disagreeing, Reed, because that's what I'm calling.
I disagree.
That's what I'm calling responsibility, is weighing the pluses and minuses of various things, just like we do in our daily lives. I would say defining stakeholders very broadly is important to responsible AI. So when you think about the impacts, benefits, and harms, you need to think beyond your company, beyond your employees, beyond your customers, to society more generally. I think it's a complex analysis, but I think that's what we're looking for people to do. That's what we're looking for organizations to do. If I cheat on my wife, then I'm going to destroy the trust in our relationship. That I may end up getting divorced. That could hurt my children. There's maybe some benefits. There's some things I would like to do, but I'm not going to do them because I see the broader picture. And maybe I love my wife too. But I think that all goes into responsibility. And where I think another reason I like responsibility is this is where I think the law is going. So if you look at the law and on AI, it's not about defining let's bracket bias in the U.S. That's the one substantive value everybody can agree on. But it doesn't really define what's okay and what's not okay. What it says is do an impact assessment. What it says is do an audit. And so what it says is disclose the impact assessment that you did to the Attorney General. That's responsibility. That's process. It's what I would call management-based regulation, requiring certain management steps, and information-based regulation, disclosure, in the hope that those two will drive more socially beneficial outcomes. I do think we need more of what I would call outcome-based regulation, like defining the outcomes, what's okay to do, what's not to do. We have to, as a society, come to some kind of consensus around that. We haven't done that yet. But I do think we can encode responsibility in the law and we can enforce it. And we've seen that in other areas. Go back to the environmental area, which was my background, like pollution prevention planning. You have to do a pollution prevention plan or a risk management plan for your electrical utility or hazardous waste, hazardous substances, et cetera. And that kind of planning requirements, it is hoped, will lead to better social outcomes. So I think this idea of responsibility also aligns with, and it's a way of explaining what we're seeing in the law. I'm thinking of like the Colorado Privacy Act, for example, requiring impact assessments for high-risk processing, including profiling. that's a process that's being required. That's requiring them to be responsible.
Yeah.
So that's why I like it better.
You know what this means? I will have, by the time this releases, I'll have recorded the intro in which I said that you founded the Ohio Data Ethics Working Group. You got to rename. You got to be the Ohio Data Responsible.
I do. We founded that. We're in our 4th year now, where I was still using data ethics and many other people were. And through the process of thinking about this and my research and writing about it, I've come around to responsible AI management. But
Right.
if I were to name the group, but also the organizations we work with want to think beyond AI to other uses of data, and it's a broader term. But you're right. I would probably rename it right now.
Okay, great, good. Full disclosure, I go back and forth between whether I use the phrase or not. So sometimes I'll use responsible AI, sometimes I'll use AI ethical risks, sometimes I'll use AI governance. Right. And at the end of the day, I'm just trying to speak a language that will get us to have the conversation where ultimately I'll be able to pull in legit ethical considerations that I want them to account for properly. And if I need to say responsible AI in order to get that conversation, then I'll say responsible AI.
And if I can add a little promo here, you mentioned the Data Ethics Working Group. We do have this Ohio Data Ethics Working Group. We're expanding it actually to organizations from other states. And it's a collaborative of organizations that want to work together on getting better at data ethics and AI governance. And if anybody in your listening audience is interested, they should contact me at Ohio State.
Sounds good. Dennis, thank you so much. Appreciate it. This has been fun.
Thank you, Reed. The time went by more quickly than I thought. So appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks so much, everyone, for listening. And now let me thank the people who have made this podcast possible. So first of all, we have Delano Alexander. He's been with me since day one. He showed me even how to start recording a podcast in the first place. He does editing stuff. He's been fantastic, and he does really everything I ask him to and more. I've never met anyone else who just says so much. Yeah, I don't know how to do that, but I'll figure it out. What more could you ask for in a producer? Next up, Jennifer Strong, my podcast guru. I don't know what else to call her. She just had advised me on how to design the podcast, how to grow it, and she's responsible for, if you like, this kind of season 2 relaunch and everything around it. So thank you to you, Jennifer. Next up, Meg Marco, responsible for all the excellent artwork. Before I did the artwork, I didn't really know what I was doing. We put it together. It worked well enough, but I think Meg really did a phenomenal job bringing everything together. Garrett Lang, sound engineer that I frankly don't deserve. He's just too good for this podcast. Don't tell him I said that, though. Next up, Benjamin Koltgen. He is a professor of philosophy who has helped me source guests, identify who's interesting, who has things to say, etc., etc. So without him, I wouldn't have anyone to talk to. And then finally, Ashley Wasylenko, who helps with all manner of administrative things, making sure that the podcast guests find their way to the podcast, can schedule the recording, get their bios and headshots, and really just keeping the show on the rails and me organized. Thanks to all of you. Really appreciate all your hard work.